Good afternoon, it's Lee Cassidy from Tactile Technology, and we're on for another episode of SMESec. So we talk about all things cybersecurity, but actually do it in plain English, not Klingon. So we've got Pete with us again today, so let's get Pete in. How are you, Pete?
Yeah, good, thanks. And you, yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. So today we're going to talk about IASME Governance. So we talked about Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus yesterday, but a lot of people might not be familiar with IASME Governance. But it's another framework similar to ISO 27001 that gives you a structure to actually look at how you can ensure that your business is safe, isn't it? And a level of certification.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's we refer to it sometimes as a cost-effective alternative to 27001. It's an information security management system, exactly the same, but it was actually designed for SMEs, small to medium-sized enterprises. So it still covers the key points you'd expect of an information security management system. It's based around identifying your assets, attributing a value to those assets, be them information or physical, and then identifying any sort of threats and extrapolating your risk so you can manage your information and security risk. And it's really quite achievable for SMEs, whereas ISO 27001 can be a slightly longer journey and a more sort of involved journey.
Yeah, it's very process orientated, isn't it? Because it's a quality standard rather than a specifically a cybersecurity process. So very similar to ISO 9001 that a lot of people have done to actually track processes within the business and make sure they're actually got that trackability through anything that happens. So product coming in, manufacture that product, and then going out, to someone. It's a process of tracking, isn't it? 9001 and 27001 follows a similar piece in that. So if somebody wanted to go down that IASME governance piece, tell us a little bit about the process they would follow to actually achieve it.
Well, it's actually very similar to the process I described yesterday of how to approach the Cyber Essentials certification. And it's generally delivered by, again, certification bodies who typically would be delivering Cyber Essentials also. So the same sort of rules apply to finding the certification body that's going to work for you. Core values, flexibility, adaptability, knowledge of your sector, etc.
Making sure that somebody that you can work with is a key thing, isn't it? And that similar cultural compatibility as well as a bit of flexibility.
Yeah, even more so than just the Cyber Essentials, because you're going to start getting under the bonnet a bit more with IASME in the sense that it actually incorporates Cyber Essentials self-assessment as part of it. So when you do complete an IASME governance assessment, you come out with two certificates. You come out with a Cyber Essentials certificate, and you come out with an IASME governance certificate. But you get more in the consultant or the supporting company, the certification body will get more into the bonnet of your business, because you're not just looking at those cyber controls, you're looking at policy, process, and governance. So it's a little bit more of an intimate process there.
So I'm assuming they just do the same self-assessment piece to start with you do with the Cyber Essentials, answering the questionnaire just to get to that first level of knowledge, and then what happens after that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So it's a questionnaire that's completed. The questionnaire, before I move on to what happens next, it's broken down into three main chunks though, which is really important to understand before we start. As I said, there's the Cyber Essentials aspect, taking care of the cyber technical controls. There's a section on GDPR, personal data, managing personal data. And then there's a section on the conventional information governance piece, looking at registering of and recording of assets, attributing value, and your information governance policies, processes, risk, etc. So you've got these three distinct areas within the assessment, and you can actually see, you can identify them quite easily as you're going through the question set. Exactly the same as Cyber Essentials, you complete the self-assessment, and then that self-assessment is marked by your chosen certification body, who will then, you either be in like I said yesterday, a compliant state, or you might need to go back and provide further detail or make some adjustments and then adjust your assessment accordingly. Once you've done that, you achieve that self-assessed certification stage. There is a second stage to it, which is what we call IASME Governance Audited. And this is where a certification body that is qualified to provide the auditing service would come in and actually physically audit your organization against the standard. So very, very similar in a way to how Cyber Essentials Plus is the audited version of Cyber Essentials basic level.
So it's effectively validating the answers you've given. So these are the assets we've got in our infrastructure. These are how they're protected. Go and check those assets, check how they're protected. GDPR, this is how we're looking after customer data, and this is where we store it, and this is how our policy against that. Maybe checks on individuals who have access to that data, like DBS or those kind of checks as well. And then again, going and auditing that, making sure everything they've answered is true, and then following on to that governance aspect and the process behind all of those components as well.
Yeah, but at the same time as that, getting the right feel that the culture and the knowledge of staff within the organisation is correct, and it's not just one person's gone away, completed this, and
because that could be a worry, couldn't it? That someone could actually just do all the paperwork and everything. So it looks like it's right, but in reality, it's only one person, and everyone else is just carrying on dealing with day to day the way they did before, without any of those checks in place.
That's absolutely it. Exactly the same as a 27001 information security management system would be audited. It's looking for those same sort of aspects. And there's a similar tempo as well. So the audit is done once every 3 years as opposed to every year. And then the interim years, the self-assessment is sufficient on its own. So it's once you get onto that sort of tempo, every year expect to be completing the self-assessment, but every 3rd year, there'll be an audit.
Yeah. And coming back to the GDPR piece, there's no certification for GDPR in this country anyways. There's no one gives anything out. It's just a standard that most people have got to adhere to. So I would assume by going down the IASME governance route, they'll also get some kind of a level of certification against GDPR as well.
Yeah. So we refer to it as GDPR Readiness, and it was obviously very popular back in May 2018 when GDPR became publicised quite heavily. The Data Protection Act was already in existence, so people should have been taking care of these things anyway, but there was a big focus on it. And you're absolutely right, there's no formal certification for this, but a lot of companies have put an awful lot of work and effort into getting their house in order with regards to data protection, personal data protection. But they've got nothing to take credit for this or hang their hat on to say, we've done this, and by the way, it's been checked independently. Whereas the IASME Governance certification does provide a degree of that sort of third-party verification that these things are in place and have been checked, especially if they go through to the audited stage. The other aspect of it, if companies have not gone on that journey yet, it gives them a framework to follow. To try and start that journey off. And that's sometimes all that companies need, really. Just need to know which direction to go in, because it can be a little bit confusing of which way to start.
It's quite daunting as well for a lot of businesses that haven't done it before, to come into actually trying to be compliant with GDPR regulations, especially if you're a business that does hold a lot of customer data. Where do you start? So actually going through that process and actually having that framework and then have that structure then to put all those processes and documentation on, it makes it a lot easier to get yourself compliant as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we apply the same approach when we're delivering the Cyber Essentials approaches as well. Just information governance, just like cyber, if it's not your core area, which most business owners it's not, they just need that sort of framework and guidance to follow, and it just makes the whole process much easier. And it also makes it more affordable because they're not doing things they didn't necessarily need to do, which is the absolute must be avoided when you're running a business. There's no point in running around jumping through hoops you don't need to jump through.
Yeah, I'll say you've got enough to do as it is running the business, but also if you want to ensure that you're, got a certain level of security and be able to prove it to people as well. Because I think that's also part of this. It's not only having the confidence that your system is in place and it's been independently verified and you know that you're secure, but it's that second thing, proving that to others. Like we were talking about Cyber Essentials yesterday and Cyber Essentials Plus, working with others, especially local authorities that might be tendering or other businesses. They want to have a certain level of confidence that you've got your act together around cybersecurity, because you could be the effectively soft underbelly that the hackers go into to get internally to to their business via you. So I think it's quite important we have that in place. But what else does IASME Governance deliver on top of what they would get from Cyber Essentials Plus? Not only like the GDPR and the information side of things, are there any other areas that they get any additional value from?
Well, kind of like we discussed already, it's having that framework in place to be able to ensure that your business is operating in the most efficient way it can do from a security point of view. It enables, when you start looking at information risk, that enables business owners and business leaders, managers to be able to put a more accurate picture on what they need to invest in certain areas to protect their business to that required level. I mean, it's quite awkward. You sort of see, there's an old analogy of, people fit CCTV systems or video surveillance systems because they feel they should do it because that's security, but actually they might not have a need or a requirement for that. And when you start breaking down your information and your physical risk, looking at your threats and your vulnerabilities, you can actually quite quickly see if you need a CCTV system or not, depending on where your assets are sitting, or whether you want to invest that in that area where that investment might be better made in locks on door, replacement locks on doors or cybersecurity controls. So it enables companies to do that. The other thing that we see being used to really good effect is compliance with tendering, and you mentioned this earlier slightly. A lot of government-based organisations are coming around to the idea of taking credit for the IASME governance standard. So it's not uncommon to see it now being specified as an alternative to ISO 27001. So a typical thing to see if you're going on a government tendering portal or certain departments within the government would be, you need to have Cyber Essentials Plus, and ISO 27001 or IASME audited. And when they specify that, they specify it typically to the gold standard. There's 3 levels of getting it audited to: bronze, silver, and gold. That's really just a score. It's not the different type of audit you have. It's how well you've achieved your audit pass, as it were. The majority of clients will be aiming to go through it with a gold score at the audit pass. And it's based on the number of non-compliances that you might be able to carry or might not be carrying.
It's like a percentage across different areas, is it then?
There's a total of number of non-compliances that you need to have a less than to achieve gold. Yeah.
Okay. So if somebody was going to go, off and go through this process, what would you say the actual time period would take from beginning to end on average?
So as the first stage is a self-assessment, it's like a bit like how long is a piece of string, because it's how long it takes them to their schedule, sit down, work through the questions, collate the data if they haven't got the data. This is where we can help as a company. So as Assured Technical, we do actually assist clients going through that process. So we'll come in as
in the right direction to get the information.
Exactly.
Help them uncover that information.
And that can all help speed the process up. Conversely, some clients will drag that process on for an awful long time because they start the process with all the right intentions, and then there's a high priority task comes in, they go off on that, and everything stalls. But to do it efficiently, you want to do it in a fairly short amount of time. You go through it in a week or so, that basic level. If you have enough capacity, you've got all the data to hand, you could go through within a few hours. if you've got the right knowledge of your systems in place. Conducting the audited aspect, it does extend the time frame somewhat, in the sense that it becomes a logistical issue there. You've got to find time for an auditor to come to site to go through the process. Typically it's a day on site, so we're not talking excessive amount of time on site. And we'd like anything like that, it's negotiating availability of key personnel, etc. And then once the audit's been completed, the auditor will then produce an audit report, which it can be quite a sizable task. That will take them a few days to produce that, and then that report has to be verified by the IASME organisation themselves. So
that's then sent in, so you're waiting for that to be completed.
Yeah, absolutely. And then once that third-party verification has been completed on the audited report, then certification can be put in place. So it can be anything from, realistically, 2-3 weeks to this process could go on for a couple of months.
So it's mainly how quickly that the company wanting it actually gets the first part of it, the process done, and the self-assessment done, and also then organising the auditor to come in. Is going to be the critical paths, won't it? I would assume. So they could do it in a month quite easily if everything lines up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What about what we're talking about cost-wise? Have you got a finger in the air idea of what an average cost would be? I'm assuming it's going to be different, depending on the size of the organisation.
Absolutely, it's size and complexity of the organisation, and then also on that journey, how much support do they need? So if they were going it alone, trying to do everything themselves, all in-house, obviously that's going to be cheaper, but then it will take them longer. So it's a cost-benefit analysis there that they need to look at. If they engage with a company like ours, as an example, who are going to come in, we're going to help them through the process. It's going to speed the process up, therefore ultimately potentially costing them less, depending on how much time their time is worth to them and how quickly they need the certification in place. The audited
people don't always calculate their own cost and associate their own cost to that. If you've got an employee working on something for a week or 2 weeks, you've got to really consider the amount of cost, because they're not doing their traditional job during that period of time.
Absolutely. And if you're completing this in a small to medium-sized business, you're probably going to be fairly senior in the business. So your charge-out rate or your cost to that business is actually going to be quite high. It's not something that someone with minimal knowledge of the industry or knowledge of the subject would be able to just go and get their head around very, very easily. You need to have that sort of core business knowledge.
Okay. Well, we've run out of time, but thanks ever so much for that. And so hopefully that's been of use to people. Anybody watching this, if you've got any questions, do some comments on the actual post, whether you've seen it in YouTube, if you've seen it in Facebook, or you've seen it through LinkedIn. Put any questions on, we'll come back with any answers. But again, if you're interested in actually going through that process, contact myself or Pete Rucinski at Assure Technical, and we can take you through that process and what it looked like. And also, if you're interested in actually achieving it and seeing what that will give you as an organisation, I'm sure Pete would be very happy to take you on board as a customer as well. Well, thanks ever so much. Hopefully we can get you on again in the future, maybe to talk about your holistic security audits, because that's taking it to another stage, looking at generic security across the whole organisation, which will be quite good. We've also got a comment. This is in-house comment, though, I think. So your wife's saying, very educational. Thank you very much. I'm sure she knew all about it to start with, though, didn't she?
She's got a pretty good handle on it, yeah.
But anyway, thanks ever so much, Pete, for joining us. And if you could stay on afterwards, we'll just have a quick catch up when we finish. Thanks a lot.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.